Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Indycar. My name is Gordon Ross, and this morning it's actually quite a nice day down here in Partick. The sun's shining again, and the snow seems to have stopped falling. But it's been a day when other things have been falling out, mostly political fallout, I have to say, from the events over the last few days. In an earlier post this morning, I was talking about the Scottish Tories and what an oxymoron those two words are, Scottish and Tories together. There's no such thing as Scottish Tories. There are only British Tories. And this is a fact that we've been shown yet again this week, as the Scottish Tories, the Dirty Dozen as they're sometimes known, including obviously Ruth Davidson, but the Dirty Dozen who sold Scotland out yet again after promising that they were going to protect Scotland's interests at Westminster. They were going to fight for Scottish interests. And what did they do as soon as they were presented with the opportunity? They fought for the British Tory party's interests in Westminster. They supported the government. They defeated all attempts to amend the repeal bill so that devolution could be protected and respected by returning powers which rightfully belong in Holyrood. And now that isn't going to happen. Despite the fact that in the newspapers last week it was widely put about by the British press that the SNP were expecting powers to be returned to Scotland, apparently because somebody in the Tory party had promised them that this would happen. Now, I don't actually believe that anybody in the SNP expected for a nanosecond that the Tories would want to return these powers to the Scottish Government, especially a Scottish Government which has an SNP, not a majority, but an SNP controlling interest in the Scottish Government. So the situation at the moment is bizarre. We now have the Scottish Parliament sitting effectively undefended now. It's not possible to defend its powers anymore because the repeal bill will strip them away like paint stripper. Layer after layer of powers and abilities will be ripped away from the Scottish Parliament as soon as the repeal bill can be forced through. Now, the repeal bill, remember, is supposed to come into effect on the day that Brexit occurs, which is the 29th of March 2019. However, I've not seen it written anywhere that there's a guarantee that they won't bring the repeal bill in before Brexit, or even quite a long way before Brexit. We know that the Tory party is extremely good at scheming, and they are probably the most adept political schemers of anybody in Western Europe when it comes to their Machiavellian plots to prevent things happening that they don't wish to happen, and to spike the guns of the opposition. Now, the SNP, for their part, has fought as hard as they can, including with the Labour Party, to make sure that amendments were forced through on the repeal bill to protect Scotland's interests and to protect the Scottish Parliament from a power grab and from being robbed of its powers and even eventually closed down by the Tories at a time which suits them. But now that hasn't happened. Effectively, the Scottish Parliament is standing naked in front of the might of the British elite who want to simply remove it as an inconvenient talking shop. That's the way it is regarded. Ruth Davidson has been positioning herself further and further away from the Scottish Parliament. She's been taking less and less to do with it. Her face has been less in the Scottish media and more in the English media, and many people on social media are beginning to see what this scheme actually is involving. What they are planning to do, and it's become obvious now that this is the case, is that Ruth Davidson is being groomed to be the next Prime Minister because they know that eventually when Holyrood is shut down, Ruth Davidson will then be the only British MP, if you like, who's capable of taking charge of the Tory party and who's got the media training to do it. Remember, Ruth Davidson's background is in television. She worked for years for the BBC before she was a politician, and she's very good at presenting things on television. You've got to admit she is talented at doing that. So the Tory party's realised this, and they've been taking her further and further out of Scottish politics in preparation for dismantling that layer of Scottish politics and removing it and bringing back central control. Now remember, if you think about what's happening in Northern Ireland at the moment, why is there no power sharing executive in Northern Ireland right now? It's because the Tories want to take centralised control. The DUP also wants the Tories to take centralised control, and that's why they are not negotiating with Sinn Féin. It's not because Sinn Féin has snubbed them in some way. Sinn Féin would be quite happy to form a new power sharing executive, I'm sure, but it's not going to happen because the Tory plan for Brexit is for Ireland and Scotland to be brought to heel, and that means closing down devolution immediately as soon as possible, and by forcing through the repeal bill with 0 amendments. Now we've already seen that happen. There's not been any amendments attached to that bill. It's going back to the Lords. It will be rubber stamped there, and it will be forced through, I think, before Brexit happens. Now I've been warning for some time that the Brexit clock is not just ticking, it's been accelerating. It's not running at normal time. The Brexit repeal bill, I think, will be brought forward because the Tories will want to destroy Holyrood and destroy the Stormont Assembly forever before they take control of the country after Brexit. They'll not want anything standing in their way. Now remember, if you want to catch a crook, you've got to think like a crook. If you want to catch the criminal who's going to steal the jewels, you need to be able to think like them. Now, if you were going to take charge of the whole United Kingdom during a period when it's going to be crippled economically by its own stupidity, how are you going to finance that when you've got lots of little governments around the UK resisting all attempts for you to get control of their resources and to plunder them, to frack beneath them and so forth? Well, the only way you can really do that is to remove that opposition completely and take it out before it becomes a problem. And I believe that that's exactly what the Tories are now planning to do. I don't think the repeal bill is going to wait until the 29th of March. I think it's going to be brought forward. And I can see the way that the United Kingdom is deploying its different forces around us at the moment and how they are spreading their troops around and what they're planning to do with them. The way people are being positioned at the moment, particularly Ruth Davidson and her dirty dozen MPs, they've been used to prop up the Tory government to give it the majority it needed to force through the repeal bill. It was nothing to do. In fact, it was completely the reverse of looking after Scotland's interests. It was looking after Britain's interests first. Remember, with the Tories, it's always Britain first and Scotland somewhere a distant 14th after they've stripped the oil and gas out of it and they've wrung out the maximum amount of use from the Scottish resources and kept their people down. So I think we can safely say that we are now in the most perilous position that we've ever been in as a devolved nation, as it were, because we are a nation, unlike Catalonia, which isn't actually a nation as defined by the usual standards. Scotland is a nation, and we still have the right to self-determination, and we still have a mandate to vote for independence. And yet I hear recently that, and this is unconfirmed at the moment, but the Scottish Government, despite my efforts and other people's efforts to get them to adopt the new blockchain voting system, which would allow us to have a totally tamper-proof referendum, they still haven't moved on it. And we're being advised as individuals to actually send our suggestions for blockchain voting to the British Electoral Commission. Now, the British Electoral Commission has got absolutely zero interest in using blockchain because they like being able to manipulate the results of elections. And no matter how people trust the Electoral Commission, the facts were that there were massive voting irregularities in the last referendum, which was overseen by the British Electoral Commission. All of these things, when you take all of these facts into account and you look at the way the British are deploying their forces and their people, the Electoral Commission on one side, the Tories and their MPs on the other, and you look at the way the British Labour Party is behaving in Scotland, the British Lib Dem Party, how they're behaving, all of them are clubbing together. This is the anti-independence party. Liberals, Tories and Labour. They are all acting together. So all of these forces are being ranged, the battle lines are being drawn at the moment. And the problem is that we are not responding fast enough to this. And I believe that if we're not careful, we're going to be caught napping again because we trusted the British and their systems and their so-called democracy. We don't live in a democracy. Everything is manipulated. The media manipulates everybody's opinions to suit the purpose of the government. It's not giving us choices, it's telling us what the choices will be that are available to us. And our choices are narrowing down to virtually none. Daily, every day, another choice is taken off the table. Every day, another defensive line is removed by the British state. We're now at the stage where we have no way to defend the Scottish Constitution. We have no way to defend the Scottish Parliament from being closed. The last line of defence is a new policy, a new piece of legislation that the Scottish Government is putting in place, which is designed to freeze the powers of the Scottish Parliament in place for as long as possible. But even that will eventually be challenged in the High Court in London, in the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom, and even that can eventually be overturned. So the Scottish Government is expecting a hard and dirty fight, and they have produced this piece of legislation as a way of slowing down the rapid advancement of the British state as it tries to eradicate all types of devolution in Scotland. Remember, devolution was only brought in because it was insisted upon by the Council of Europe. They were the ones who said that Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales must have their own regional democracies. They must have their own regional assemblies and parliaments in order for the United Kingdom of the four nations to function as a member of the EU. As soon as we leave the EU, all of that is gone. All of the protections have gone. The repeal bill destroys them at a stroke. The repeal bill also allows the United Kingdom to take back every European law and tear it up into little pieces and throw it in the bin. They've also now told us that they are not going to accept the European Court of Human Rights as the arbiter of our human rights, and they're also going to tear up the European Human Rights Act. And these are the pieces of legislation that protect all of us from the excesses of fascistic and dictatorial governments. We're now going to be at the whim of a very far-right Tory government forever after this if we're not careful. Now, I have spent a lot of my time warning people about the danger signs that I'm seeing around me, and I'm hoping that those of you who are watching this show today will put some pressure both on the Scottish Government, whom I know are working hard. I'm not trying to blame them here, but I'm just trying to point something out, that this might accelerate far faster than they anticipate. Remember, the Tories particularly are extremely good at getting the jump on people. They do the unexpected. They have all sorts of contingency plans. They'll find ways of rewriting the rules to suit themselves, and to do things far earlier than people anticipated, before you've had a chance to react to it. We need to have a plan B in case the repeal bill is accelerated and in case the powers of Holyrood are suddenly stripped from us before we had a chance to do anything about it. It's very important that our voting system is put in place right now, and if anybody in the SNP higher echelons are listening to this broadcast today, please tell the people of Scotland what you're going to do about the voting system, and tell us now. We need some reassurance. Nobody wants to go into the next referendum with the same ridiculous postal voting system checked by a Tory party-owned private company miles away in England, checking votes for 3 or 4 different constituencies that I know of last time. And clearly there were massive discrepancies, particularly in votes in places like Argyll and Bute, which have never been adequately explained, and nobody seems to want to delve too deep into it in case they find out the corruption levels that have been going on. So although the whole of the last referendum was open to quite severe vote tampering, and nobody could really prove it, and nobody seems to want to prove it up in Holyrood, the point is that we've got to protect the next vote. We mustn't let it get tampered with, because it's too important. This is going to be I've said this before, this is our last chance to have a referendum, because once the repeal bill goes through, the chances of Holyrood holding out for a few more years are zero. Holyrood will be shut, it will be depiled, because if I was running the Tory party and I wanted to bring the whole four nations to heel and have them all controlled from government in London, the first thing I would do is strip all these regional parliaments and assemblies of their powers quite rapidly, so they very quickly became irrelevant. And then I would start the media campaign saying how irrelevant these particular talking shops had become and how they were a waste of public money, and before you know it, the public opinion would be saying, well, you better close it because it's just a waste of money. And that's precisely what they're doing. It's heading that way now. The Tory government is also in the process of destroying the NHS prior to a massive privatisation, which is going to destroy and rebuild the NHS as a completely privately owned, privately run, insurance-run business model, just like the USA. And don't think that Scotland's NHS is bulletproof here. It's not, because as soon as the powers are removed, which protect things like the Scottish NHS, the Scottish education system, because those will be repealed as well, remember, they have the Henry VIII powers waiting in reserve as a backstop in case they have any difficulty in closing these things down. They will simply use the Henry VIII powers because it's an emergency. They have to do something quickly. And they will wield that axe. They will just cut these things up into little pieces and remove them. Okay, so I'm being a bit of a shill today. I'm being a bit of a what would you call me? A bit of a fearmonger. But I'm doing this for a reason. It's because nobody else is saying these things. And if I don't say them and nobody else says them, the government's not going to do anything. I mean, our government, our Scottish government, needs to take heed of these things now. And I'm sure they know what I'm talking about is going to happen. But I think they think it's not going to happen until after March 2019. But I've got a horrible feeling it's going to happen a lot faster than that. And if that happens, that will spike the guns of the whole independence movement, because they will remove our ability to debate things publicly, and they will remove the right of Scotland to have its own politicians to debate things here. It will remove a whole layer of protective decision making that can be done here in our local area, in Scotland itself, in its own parliament, to protect us. The protections are going to be gone soon. Anyway, that's this morning's programme in a nutshell. The Tories have sold the entire country down the river yet again. These idiots who voted for them in the North East and in the Central Belt, thinking that they were protecting the Union. Well, yes, they are protecting the Union, but at what cost? At the cost of the entire country's economy. That's what they've sold out. The jobs, the futures, everything that was safe here in Scotland under the SNP government, protected and safe, our health service, our education system, our jobs, our prosperity and our exports. Those people who voted Tory, particularly those Labour voters who voted Tory to unseat Alex Salmond and other people, they have ruined the country. Those Tories that they've elected have now sold us all out. There is no protection for Scotland now. The whole place is at risk, and it's their fault. They've largely helped the Tories to get this majority in Westminster. So, sorry about that. Somebody just put in a call through while I was talking there. The point is that we're at risk now, and we need to make our voices heard. We need to make sure that the SNP accelerates its programme, that we move faster, that we get the blockchain system in place right now so that we are ready to run this vote without the tampering of the British state. Even if it is only, in theory, a referendum just for information, an advisory referendum, it is still a legal ballot. And under the terms of the Declaration of Arbroath and under the terms of the 1707 Acts of Union, Scotland can end the Union by a simple majority vote of any kind, whether it's in a parliamentary election here in Holyrood, or whether it's a referendum. It doesn't matter, and it doesn't matter whether the British state approves of it or not. The fact is, it's a democratic vote, and under the rules and under the legislation, we're entitled to vote to leave the UK if we do not like the way that our country has been governed. That's been our right since 1320, and it's still our right today. If we don't like what's happening and we don't like who's ruling us, we are the sovereign people of Scotland. We are entitled to vote and have them removed. The problem is that we may not get that vote if we're not careful, and we may not get a vote that is even fair, and we might not get a vote which is untampered with if we're not careful. So these are the problems that we face at the moment, and these are the messages I want to put out today to both our SNP government and also to the Tory party in Scotland. We haven't finished with them yet. The Tories in Scotland, they're going to get booted out. And I tell you one thing, when we are independent, the Tory party should be banned in Scotland. It should be banned outright as a terrorist, seditious organisation which is plotting the downfall of the nation. They really are the worst kind of traitors. They've sold out their country, they've sold out their neighbours and their friends, they've sold out their own children, all so that the British state can keep control of Scotland's resources forever, and also so that they can get preferment and positions of power and peerages in London. It's all about money to them. It's all about money and power. It's nothing to do with us, nothing to do with democracy. Tories will sell you down the river. They'll sell their own grannies down the river. They don't care. They're literally sociopaths. Anyway, I've had a good rant this morning and I feel a lot better for doing that now. But the point is, we need to move faster, and we're not doing it fast enough at the moment. Now that the brakes are off with Brexit and the brakes are off with the repeal bill, we're in a lot of danger. And I really want to know that the SNP is on the game and on the top of it, and making sure that we are going to be ahead of them and not always one step behind as we seem to be at the moment. I'm off now. It's always good to have a vent online now and again and let the steam off, but I know a lot of people feel the same way today, and they all need to have a vent, and they all need to let their representatives at Holyrood know how they feel. It's time for some action. We've had enough of sitting around being humiliated in Westminster day in and day out, mocked and made fun of, outnumbered, bullied, pushed around, joked at. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sick of it. I'm sick of being a second-class citizen. I'm sick of the racist comments in Westminster. I'm sick of people laughing when other people's jobs are being lost. I mean, that is just outrageous. The Tories laughing at the huge job losses in Carillion. I mean, there's up to 43,000 jobs going to go overnight, and the Tory benches were actually guffawing and laughing at this yesterday. They're appalling people. They don't deserve to run Scotland. And if I have got anything to do with, they're never ever going to run Scotland again. And in fact, if I had my way, as I say, the Tory party would be banned in Scotland as a terrorist organisation. Bye for now, I'm off.